Hello and welcome to Investment Insight. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Now let's break down what's happening in the markets today in a clear and simple way. Right now we're obviously in the middle of the current Trump administration, and literally all we hear about in the political headlines is how the U.S. and China are building trade walls.
Oh, yeah, just constant tension.
Right. It's all about geopolitical tension, tariffs, and this general decoupling of the two biggest economies in the world. But if you look really closely at the biotech sector, billions of dollars are quietly slipping right past those tariffs.
It really is a fascinating paradox, honestly.
Yeah, so today we're going to look at exactly how they are pulling this off and, more importantly, why.
Well, I mean, the political walls are definitely going up, but global capital is just incredibly fluid. It always finds a way over, under, or straight through those barriers.
Always.
And right now, the primary vehicle they're using to do this is a highly specific financial structure called the NewCo model.
Which, just to clarify for everyone, literally just stands for new company.
Exactly, just new company.
Right.
And it is reshaping the entire global pharmaceutical pipeline basically right under our noses. So our goal for this deep dive is to look at the mechanics of this structure, figure out why it unlocks so much value, and, explore what it means for you and the future of medicine.
I love looking at the actual nuts and bolts behind these massive market shifts. And to ground this, I want to use an everyday analogy.
Okay, let's hear it.
I've been thinking about this whole dynamic in terms of the high-end restaurant business.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Right. So if you look at the global biotech ecosystem right now, China basically functions like an incredibly massive, highly efficient prep kitchen.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
They are in the back, iterating, experimenting, and inventing these world-class new recipes for medical treatments. But to sell those recipes for absolute top dollar, you can't just serve them out the back door of the prep kitchen.
No, definitely not.
You need a Michelin-starred dining room with the white tablecloths, where premium patrons expect to pay a premium price. And that dining room is the U.S. financial market.
Right.
So the NewCo is essentially the legal delivery truck. It's this custom-built vehicle designed for one specific purpose: moving the intellectual property out of the prep kitchen and safely delivering it into that high-end American dining room.
I think the prep kitchen analogy captures the dynamic perfectly, especially when we look at the actual division of labor here. Because according to recent analysis, we are seeing a hyper-optimized global assembly line.
How so?
Well, the Chinese biotech sector is currently dominating the early stage work. So they handle the initial molecular discovery, the preclinical lab testing, and the early phase human trials.
They're chopping the vegetables and reducing the sauce.
Exactly. It's rapid and it's highly cost effective. And then the United States takes the baton for the heavy lifting of late stage development.
Right, because late-stage development is where the real money is spent, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Phase 3 clinical trials are notoriously expensive and insanely complex. The U.S. brings deep expertise in navigating those massive multi-regional trials, managing a rigorous FDA approval process, and ultimately executing the commercial launch.
So the NewCo model simply formalizes this division of labor into a legal framework.
Right. And the scale of this trend is staggering. Just looking at the data from 2025 alone, the total value of licensing deals coming out of Greater China hit $137.7 billion.
Wait, $137 billion in 1 year?
In a single year, and that was spread across 186 different deals.
Wow.
And the momentum is only accelerating. By early February of 2026, we had already seen another 38 deals announced.
That is wild. That's not just testing the waters. I mean, that is an entire industry practically relocating its pipeline.
It really is.
It also tells me that the Chinese ecosystem is churning out an incredible volume of viable science.
It is. In fact, recent analysis shows China now accounts for nearly 30% of all global drug development.
Okay, let's unpack this, though. My instinct as an investor, if I see the prep kitchen pumping out incredible assets, I just want to buy the Chinese parent company outright. I want to own the kitchen. I want the whole pie, right? Why go through the hassle of building a brand new NewCo?
Well, buying a Chinese biotech firm outright right now is basically a total non-starter.
Because of the regulatory baggage?
Exactly. You'd be absorbing an immense amount of geopolitical friction. You'd be acquiring a company subject to Chinese domestic regulations, operating under heavy international scrutiny, and facing an incredibly skeptical U.S. political environment.
So the NewCo model solves this by completely isolating the asset.
Precisely. You don't buy the company, you just buy the overseas rights to a specific drug candidate.
Let's look under the hood of that transaction, actually. How exactly do you isolate the asset legally?
So, an American venture capital firm, or maybe a syndicate of investors, will set up a brand new corporate entity. Usually it's a C corporation in Delaware. That is the NewCo. This empty shell company then signs a licensing agreement with the Chinese biotech firm. The Chinese firm usually keeps the right to sell the drug inside China, but they grant the NewCo the exclusive rights to develop and commercialize the drug everywhere else in the world.
And I'm assuming money changes hands here.
Oh yeah, the NewCo pays the Chinese firm an upfront fee plus the promise of future royalty payments if the drug actually succeeds.
Okay, so overnight, you stripped the intellectual property away from the geopolitical baggage.
Exactly.
You now have a 100% American company. It has a U.S.-based executive team. It's funded by U.S. venture capital, and it operates strictly under U.S. corporate law. The only connection to China is literally just the origin of the science.
You nailed it. That's exactly how it works.
But, in theory, isolating the asset makes total sense. Wall Street, however, doesn't run on theory. Do we have a real-world stress test for this NewCo model? Because I want to know if these custom-built delivery trucks are actually making it to the Michelin star dining room intact.
We have several, actually, but the most prominent blockbuster proof of concept recently is a company called Kailera.
Kailera.
Yeah, they are practically the textbook case study for how to execute this strategy. So Kailera was formed as a NewCon in October 2024, and they struck this massive licensing deal with Hungary, which is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in China.
And what did they license?
Kailera secured the global ex-China rights to 4 different drug candidates focused on weight loss.
Oh, wow. And just to add some context to those specific assets for you listening, weight loss drugs, specifically the GLP-1 class, are essentially the holy grail of modern pharma right now.
They are completely dominating the market.
Yeah.
Just for those unfamiliar with the underlying mechanism, GLP-1 is a hormone naturally produced in your gut that basically signals to your brain that you are full.
Right.
These new drugs mimic that hormone. They delay gastric emptying and significantly reduce appetite. So what started out as a treatment for type 2 diabetes has just exploded into a massive societal-level treatment for obesity and related cardiovascular issues.
People are going crazy for them.
The demand is so high that manufacturers literally cannot produce it fast enough.
So Kailera is holding the hottest ticket in town.
Oh, without a doubt.
They take these 4 highly promising Chinese GLP-1 candidates, package them safely inside their Delaware-registered NewCo, and then march straight to Wall Street.
Yep.
And the market reaction was explosive. Right? In April 2026, Kailera goes public. They raised $625 million in their IPO.
It was huge.
And on the very first day of trading, the stock surged 62.5%. I mean, the market was absolutely ravenous for this.
The reception was phenomenal, for sure. Though I will add a slight reality check to some of the media coverage that was surrounding it.
Oh.
Yeah, you might have seen breathless headlines calling it the biggest biotech IPO in history.
I did see some of that, yeah.
Well, the data shows that's an overstatement. It's more accurately categorized as one of the strongest market debuts in what has recently been a somewhat sluggish biotech sector. But regardless of its exact historical ranking, Kailera successfully proved the core thesis of the NewCo model, which is valuation arbitrage.
Let's break down that valuation arbitrage, because I feel like that is the actual engine driving this entire trend. What is actually happening to the price of that drug candidate when it crosses the border?
It's all about the premium the market is willing to pay. Fundamentally, a chemical compound has a certain baseline value if it is owned and developed by a company listed in China.
Right.
But if you take that exact same molecule with the exact same early clinical data and you place it inside a US-based legal structure, Wall Street assigns it an exponentially higher valuation.
It reminds me of buying a vintage watch.
How so?
Imagine you find this incredible, authentic vintage watch at a yard sale in a small rural town for $20. The value is suppressed by the location.
Okay, yeah.
But if you take that exact same watch, polish it, put it in a velvet box, and present it at a high-end auction house in New York City, It sells for $20,000. The gears inside the watch didn't change at all. The venue changed.
That's a brilliant way to look at it. The U.S. market is the New York auction house. It has the deepest pools of institutional capital in the world. Pension funds, mutual funds, specialized biotech investors who really understand the risk profile of drug development and are willing to pay massive multiples for future revenue.
Right.
Plus, going through a U.S. entity provides a clear, transparent pathway to FDA approval, which remains the absolute gold standard globally. So you are taking a Chinese valuation, applying a U.S. legal structure,
Right.
and instantly unlocking an American valuation.
The NewCo is the velvet box.
Exactly. The NewCo is the velvet box.
But, okay, this brings up a massive logical gap for me.
What's that?
If the U.S. market is the ultimate auction house, and that's where the massive multiples are, why wouldn't the Chinese pharmaceutical companies just set up their own U.S. subsidiaries?
Nah.
Like, if Hangrui has a brilliant GLP-1 drug, why license it to Kailera and give up a massive chunk of the upside? Why not just fly to New York and sell the watch themselves?
That is the crucial question. And the answer comes down to a two-front wall that has been erected over the last few years.
Okay.
It is currently almost impossible for a Chinese biotech firm to directly navigate the U.S. market at scale. They are facing immense pressure from health regulators on one side and national security legislation on the other.
Let's start with the health regulators. What changed at the FDA?
The defining moment was a landmark decision by the FDA in 2022. Eli Lilly and a Chinese firm called Innovent had co-developed a very promising cancer drug.
Okay.
The drug worked, the science was fundamentally sound, but the FDA flat out rejected it.
Really? Why?
The specific reason for the rejection was that the clinical trial data submitted was generated almost entirely from patients in China.
Wait, so the drug was actually effective, but the FDA rejected it purely because of the demographic makeup of the patient pool?
Yes, and there is a very robust scientific rationale behind that decision, to be fair. The FDA drew a firm line in the sand regarding multi-regional clinical trials.
Makes sense.
Because genetic variations across different populations can significantly affect how a drug is metabolized and its overall efficacy. Furthermore, the baseline standard of care can be very different.
Right, like a patient in the U.S. might have already failed a different first-line therapy that a patient in China never even received.
Exactly. So the FDA stated clearly, if you want to sell a drug to the American population, your trial data must reflect the diversity of the American population. You can no longer run a fast, inexpensive trial entirely in China and use that data to unlock the U.S. market.
Wow. Okay, so that effectively slams the door on the direct pipeline. You can't just discover it in Beijing and sell it in Boston. You have to build a massive, expensive, U.S.-centric trial apparatus.
Yes.
And I imagine that's where the second part of the wall comes in. Like, the political legislation makes building that apparatus incredibly difficult for a foreign firm.
Precisely. The political side of the wall is defined by the Biosecure Act.
Right.
This legislation was passed in December 2025 as part of the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA. And the core function of the Biosecure Act is that it restricts certain Chinese biotech firms and companies doing business with them from receiving U.S. federal contracts or grants.
And just to interject here, let's look at this purely objectively. Both of us are remaining absolutely neutral on the Trump administration's policies here. We aren't saying if this is right or wrong. These are simply the rules of the road right now.
Exactly. We're just looking at the market mechanics.
But the Biosecure Act fundamentally rewrote those rules for international biotech. Because federal contracts aren't just like a side hustle for pharmaceutical companies. They are the main event.
Oh, absolutely.
If your drug cannot be purchased by Medicare, Medicaid, or the Veterans Affairs health system, you have effectively lost half of your potential revenue in the United States.
That is exactly right.
Yeah.
If a Chinese parent company is flagged or restricted under this legislation, any subsidiary they own is tainted. They are locked out of the largest healthcare purchaser in the world. So, when you combine the FDA's demand for multi-regional U.S.-managed trials with the Biosecure Act's restriction on federal capital, the Chinese parent companies are structurally cornered.
So the NewCo isn't just a clever trick to juice the valuation. It is an absolute survival tactic.
Yes, it is.
By cleanly slicing the intellectual property away from the Chinese parent company and placing it in an independent Delaware C Corp, The drug is suddenly clean.
Exactly clean.
It can navigate the FDA with U.S. executives running the trials, and it can eventually be sold to Medicare because the Biosecure Act restrictions don't apply to this new independent American entity.
That's the loophole.
The science gets through, the Chinese firm gets a licensing fee, the U.S. investors capture the premium, and the geopolitical rules of the road are perfectly maintained.
It is a brilliant surgical solution to a geopolitical problem. But, focusing only on the American side of the equation leaves the story half untold.
How so?
We have to look at the prep kitchen itself. Like, why is global pharma suddenly flocking to China to find these assets in the first place?
Right, because if we rewind, I don't know, a decade or two, the prevailing stereotype of Chinese pharmaceutical manufacturing was that it was heavily focused on producing active pharmaceutical ingredients for cheap, generic knockoffs.
Right, the API stuff.
But the data we are looking at today paints a completely different picture. Today, U.S. venture capitalists are specifically targeting China because they get higher quality, cutting-edge assets faster and for less money. How did China transition from generic manufacturing to becoming the premier discovery engine for global biotech?
It comes down to a really potent combination of regulatory optimization, aggressive cost advantages, and a massive influx of top-tier talent.
Okay, let's start with the regulations.
Let's look at the regulatory environment first, because in biotech, time is the single most expensive commodity. Every day a drug is stuck in regulatory limbo is a day of patent life burning away.
Exactly.
So over the last several years, China has completely overhauled its domestic approval process. They instituted a standard 60-day implicit approval system for clinical trials.
Wait, what does implicit approval actually mean in practice?
It means that if you submit your trial paperwork to the Chinese regulators and they do not explicitly say no within 60 days, you have a green light.
You just go.
You just go. You can start dosing patients. Compare that to the months or sometimes years of back and forth red tape in other jurisdictions.
That is wild.
And it gets even more aggressive. For highly innovative new drugs, they have introduced an expedited 30-day review path.
30 days is absolute light speed in drug development. I mean, if you were a startup burning tens of thousands of dollars a day just keeping the lights on while waiting to start a phase 1 trial, a 30-day turnaround isn't just a convenience. It fundamentally changes the financial math of your entire business model.
Exactly.
It lowers the barrier to entry for testing bold new ideas.
It makes the early stage proof of concept phase incredibly cheap and fast. But, having fast rules doesn't matter if you don't have brilliant scientists executing the work.
Which brings us to the concept of the Heige. In the data, this term, which translates roughly to sea turtles, comes up constantly. Historically, this referred to Chinese scientists and executives who went overseas for their education. They trained in places like MIT or Stanford, spent a decade working at Pfizer or Merck, learning the absolute best practices of global pharma, and then swam back to China.
Right, the classic brain gain.
The old narrative was always that the Chinese government was aggressively luring them back with massive cash subsidies, free housing, and direct grants to artificially jumpstart the industry.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, while that narrative was certainly true 15 years ago during the initial push, the data shows a fundamental shift today.
Really?
Yeah, the current wave of sea turtles returning to China isn't doing it for a government housing bonus. They are returning because that early artificial push successfully created a massive, organic, self-sustaining ecosystem. It is now a genuine career move.
So they aren't going back for a handout. They are going back because the prep kitchen is actually fully built out now.
Yes. China now boasts some of the most advanced, state-of-the-art laboratory infrastructure in the world.
Oh.
There is a massive pool of highly educated postdoctoral talent ready to staff those labs. And crucially, there is a thriving domestic venture capital scene ready to fund them.
So everything is just ready to go.
Exactly. If an ambitious scientist with a great idea leaves a major U.S. pharma company and returns to China, they can immediately secure funding, utilize those 30-day regulatory fast tracks, and get their drug into human trials years faster than they ever could in the West.
So the talent pipeline is feeding the regulatory speed, which is feeding the rapid generation of high-quality drug assets.
Yep.
But because the Chinese domestic market can't possibly consume or adequately value all of this innovation on its own, it inevitably has to look outward. It needs the global market.
It needs that American auction house to realize the true financial value of the science.
And that brings us full circle right back to the NewCo. The NewCo is the necessary bridge connecting the speed and innovation of the Chinese prep kitchen with the massive valuation engine of the U.S. capital markets.
Exactly.
This has been an incredibly eye-opening look at how the market actually functions behind the headlines. Let's synthesize exactly what we've covered today so you can walk away with a clear framework of this space.
Sounds good.
First, we have to recognize a fundamental shift in the global supply chain of medicine. China has evolved from a downstream manufacturer of generic components into an upstream engine of cutting-edge, high-quality drug discovery. They are actively inventing the future of these blockbuster treatments.
Second, despite all political noise and trade friction, the United States remains the ultimate valuation machine. The sheer depth of U.S. institutional capital, combined with the global prestige of FDA approval, means the U.S. is still the premier destination for cashing in on scientific breakthroughs.
Right. And finally, when you look at the NewCo model as an investor, you have to understand what you are actually buying. The NewCo doesn't eliminate geopolitical risk. It distributes it.
Yep, it acts as a legal membrane.
Right. As an investor, you aren't just betting on the clinical data of a weight loss drug in a lab. You are betting heavily on the resilience of that legal structure. You are betting that the velvet box holding the asset is strong enough to withstand scrutiny from regulators on both sides of the Pacific.
Which really leaves us with a critical question to watch moving forward.
What's that?
Well, we've established that the NewCo model is currently the perfect legal workaround, right? It's a brilliantly designed delivery truck moving science to capital, but the geopolitical tectonic plates are still shifting.
Very true.
What happens if regulators in Washington or Beijing decide to start taxing, restricting, or outright dismantling the bridge itself? If the rules of the road change again and the NewCo loophole is closed, will financial engineers simply build a new one, or will patients ultimately be the ones who lose out on the next generation of life-saving treatments?
Wow. That is a profound tension to consider. The push and pull between political borders and the unstoppable flow of capital and science is something that will definitely define the next decade of biotech. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the mechanics of the NewTone boom. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button.